Do what I say. Refuse, try and run, disobey me. That collar on your neck will go off and take your head with it. Gather the three as I've instructed. Use your team as I use you. One of you dies, you all die. Break into the Sierra Madre's vault. I intend to take what's inside. Do this, I'll let you go. I'll let all of you go.
I pray for the safety of all good people who come to Zion. But we can't expect God to do all the work. I have been baptized twice. Once in water, once in flame. I am the right hand of the Lord, and the instrument of his vengeance. Zion may not be lost to us after all.
Why didn't I take the job? You, Courier. You were the reason. See the divide. See what happened. What was done. Your world stripped bare. All its beasts, its shadows. Got a message for you. Come find me. You know the way. Bring all your weapons. Bring your convictions. Your flag of the bull, two-headed bear. Or whatever flag you're carrying now. And at the divide, you and I, we'll have an ending to things. This is your road. When you come, you'll walk it alone.
Yippee-yay, there'll be no wedding bells for today. 'Cause I got spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle, jingle, jangle, as I go riding merrily along. Jingle, jangle, and they sing, oh, ain't you glad you're single? Jingle, jangle, and that song ain't so very far from wrong. Though I may have done some fooling, this is why I never fell. 'Cause I got got spurs that jingle
I got
jangle
spurs that jingle,
as I
jangle,
go
jingle.
riding merrily
As I
along.
go riding merrily
They
along.
sing, oh, ain't you glad
And they
to
sing,
jingle?
oh, ain't you glad
And
to
that song ain't so very far
And that
from
song
wrong.
ain't so
Very far from wrong. Riding merrily along. They sing, oh.
Blue moon, you saw me standing alone, without a dream in my heart, without a love of my own. Blue moon, you knew just what I was there for. You heard me saying a prayer for someone I really could care for. And then there suddenly appeared before me the only one my arms will hold. I heard somebody whisper, please adore me. And when I looked to the moon, it turned to gold. Blue.
War. War never changes.
Where the big horrors roam, where the mole rat and the fire gecko lay, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and my skin is not glowing all day. Home, home on the wastes, where the master's great armies once played, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and my rags are not rising all day. Home, home on the waste, where the mole rat and the fire gecko play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and my skin is not glowing all day.
War. War never changes.
We're gonna put the story somewhere in the West. So of course, Vegas. I mean, what is more iconic when you think of crazy things that you could do in the West?
I think that was really the inspiration for the story in a lot of ways, was looking back at the history of Vegas.
We really think of it as a side story. In a lot of ways, we're revisiting stuff from the original 2 games, but it stands on its own.
The first thing our creative lead and our project director did was they sat down and they sort of examined what sort of themes they wanted to explore in New Vegas.
Every Fallout game pretty much starts with war never changes. And the idea behind that is really that humanity has this unending appetite for killing each other.
Fallout New Vegas is a post-apocalyptic role-playing game. It's set a couple of hundred years after a cataclysmic nuclear war between the US and China, and it takes place at a time when the city of New Vegas is actually being rebuilt.
Fallout 3 starts with you being born, and you're a baby, and you go through your young adulthood until you leave the vault. In New Vegas, we wanted to say you start the game in a very Vegas sort of cliche style almost. You are shot in the head and dropped in a shallow grave, so it starts with essentially your would-be death.
After you're shot and left for dead in a grave, you know, you might have some desire to go see what the whole murdering business was about and why he wanted you dead in the first place.
In the course of trying to resolve that one conflict, you get pulled into larger events. So in this case, you're trying to find the people that killed you and what they were trying to get from you. In this case, it was a package you were carrying. So, of course, as you go around, you find out that what you were carrying is centrally tied into this major conflict in the area between New California Republic and Caesar's Legion and Mr. House, who's the guy that sort of runs the strip in New Vegas. Player freedom is very important in the Fallout series, and when we allow the player to basically have a choice in what they do and how they do it, by leaving the plot open in a way that basically they're just learning what's going on in the world, it gives them a lot more freedom in how they want to learn that information.
The environment is genuinely reacting to what you do as the player. You have a pretty extraordinary amount of control over the outcome of the game.
One of the things that we've tried to do is think about both technology that people would make or utilize in the new world, or things that are pre-war that people are trying to get working now that they're sort of putting the pieces back together.
Obviously, Fallout has the whole, you know, what people in the 1950s viewed the future to be like, which, you know, immediately becomes a huge playground for, oh, well, let's try this kind of blaster, this kind of laser weapon, this kind of energy weapon.
It's not microchips, it's vacuum tubes. It's not hard corners, it's rounded corners. It's the ray gun instead of the M16. There was a lot of guns, there was a lot of fun guns in the first game, but we've added so many more.
And some of those definitely range from the crazy 50s sci-fi feel to the more contemporary, you understand why that gun is cool because it's a grenade machine gun. And you understand the machine gun that shoots grenades. It's probably pretty awesome.
We have a little 9mm submachine gun. It looks like a World War II grease gun, like sort of compacted, and that's a really cool, distinctive little weapon.
The Ranger Sequoia, which is this massive ornamented revolver that only elite Rangers have. It fires like rifle rounds. It's very powerful.
We wanted to make sure that energy weapons had a very distinct feeling from guns. We wanted there to be something mechanically different about them so that the player had a different type of experience while using them. So we introduced this thing called the Recharger Rifle. And the Recharger Rifle, you don't have to carry ammo for. It recharges it automatically. But it doesn't do it as fast as you can shoot it. You have to kind of pace out how you fire it. Our audio designers have put a lot of effort into sort of changing the sound. Part of it is because our environments are so open and there's so much desert involved, they wanted to make sure that they had distant sounds and close sounds.
What we do is we take the Fallout 3 weapon assets and we have repurposed them so that they sound a little more like they're in the environment of Fallout New Vegas. So you hear the rapport of the sound bouncing off the different spaces and in the mountains in the background and all that.
We're working with Ynon Zur again, and Ynon was really excited about the sort of shift in locations.
I feel that going on this game was sort of like a coming back experience, but also a whole new one.
We've been very fortunate to have the best actors in the world, some of the best musicians in the world coming in, best composers in the world, and the best sound designers. And all these things have come together to really create a soundscape that I'm very proud of. It achieves the goals that we really set out for this project.
A lot of what we had to make sure that we did with the art style was to, in essence, make it still feel like the post-nuclear world that it was. And that is the kind of the weird 50s, but 100 years after the 50s, if the 50s just stayed the 50s, and then bringing in this idea of Vegas.
Josh had one of the first team meetings, and he talked about Vegas as being one of his ideas, but more importantly, that it'd be the Rat Pack era. And when he said that, then I was just joyous, because it's just great aesthetics at that time.
When we started the game, there were a few things aesthetically that we knew we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that the architectural style of homes and as well as the casinos either reflected 50s style from the Vegas era, or it reflected an even earlier time, more like the settlers of the West.
But it's all about Vegas. And so we want to make sure that we have this feeling of sort of this neon, and again, it feels like you're going in there and you're playing around with the mobsters, you're playing around with the Rat Pack.
The scope of this game is massive. You have basically a city in the middle of this area, and then the territory stretches all around the city and does stretch out all the way to Boulder City and to the dam.
When doing Vegas, we didn't want to neglect any of the surrounding areas around Vegas. We wanted to make sure that we had Fremont Street realized, and we have a location called Freeside in the game before they even hit Vegas. And I think once they get a taste of that, they're going to be suitably intrigued to go, okay, well, if that's Freeside, hell, I wonder what Vegas is going to be like.
The Vegas that we were representing was really classic Vegas. This is something that dovetails nicely with the general aesthetic of the Fallout series as a whole.
Everything to do with the Strip is a big artistic playground. One of the strengths we saw about being able to use Vegas as a location is because all those casinos have their own individual themes. It's like a big amusement park the size of a city. And not only do designers have a lot of fun doing quests for those areas, but artists have a fantastic time going, you know what? We can just play around with this location because that's what Vegas is all about.
When I take pictures or give reference and then say, I kind of want to like it like this, I'm kind of going to want to like this, it's very nice to see the artist come back with something that's even better than what I had imagined in the first place. I think people are really going to dig how different it is from the Capital Wasteland and how we sort of captured the feeling of the Mojave.
In Fallout, and then in Fallout New Vegas in particular, we really wanted to have sort of a lot of groups that people could interact with.
Factions are really important to us. We didn't want to make it something where it was black and white, where you have this small group of good people against a small group of bad people. It's this very complex mixture of these different people and these different factions.
The player has a lot of control over what he gets to do in the New Vegas area. He gets to influence what happens to an entire region, and in order to have that kind of influence, he needs to side with one of the factions and sort of decide where he tips the balance.
It's all about war, and that's what Fallouts have been about, is war, and so how we're really showing that is war between these factions.
We want the player to sort of have that hesitation when they're like, where do I really stand with these organizations? Like, is it really the right thing to back X, Y, or Z? And even if I go off on my own, what does that mean for everyone who's living in the world of New Vegas?
We have three primary factions, one of which is the New California Republic.
Which is this big, sprawling government that's gotten too big for its own good. It's so big, it can't control its own territories, it can't police its own laws, it certainly can't protect its own citizens. On the other hand, approaching from the east, looking to lock horns of the New California Republic, is this huge army of slavers called Caesar's Legion.
Which is this terrifying war band of slaves that has come from out of the Grand Canyon area that is just conquering everything in its path.
NCR and Caesar's Legion are sort of stalemated at the Colorado River and at Hoover Dam.
Hoover Dam is one of our signature locations in the game, and to be honest, it's what everyone is fighting over. It's still able to provide power for part of the region, which is its big draw.
Of course, Mr. House is playing into it as well, because Mr. House doesn't want NCR to win, ultimately, because he doesn't want them to take control of the Strip.
But that's not going to happen, because you're going to work for me.
The general idea is that we have the three major factions, Mr. House, NCR, and Caesar's Legion, but then there are all these sub-factions like the Great Khans, the Powder Gangs, the Kings, the Boomers, the Followers of the Apocalypse, and the player can go to those groups and try to shift alliances.
We want the player to experience those factions. We want them to know what politics are at stake and what ideologies these organizations represent.
So when they choose what factions they want to work with, it's based on something more than just a gut, they're good, they're evil reaction. So if you support Caesar, or if you support NCR, or if you help the Great Khans or the Kings, it's going to make a big difference. You can decide, you know what, I don't think any of you are really particularly well suited to be running this place, so I'm gonna fix that. That's where you essentially are either the active champion of Vegas, or you basically just said, it's anarchy now. It's not an understatement to say that the Strip is Vegas.
Vegas, 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 Vegas.
Where do you go to find what's here? It's maybe the only place of its kind in the world.
When you get to Las Vegas Boulevard and you look down the street, you have to say, I'm in Vegas. And so that's very, very important for us. Getting that look right was very important for us.
I think the Strip is going to be the thing for me. It's where we put the most amount of work in terms of design.
The scope and scale of the Strip is just something new. I mean, it's huge.
We want to make it big and huge and giant casinos and giant neon signs and tons of people milling about and make it feel like I'm actually on the Strip in real Las Vegas.
What we wanted to do was make sure that we captured a lot of the elements of Vegas that people today in the real world are excited about and appreciate, but at the same time make sure it had that 1950s sci-fi sensibility about it.
You know, that idea of recreating the spirit of classic Vegas, because that's also more of a Fallout style.
When you arrive at the Strip, it's definitely a wow moment. When you go through the gates of the Strip, you know, you find yourself in a location that you really haven't seen anything of its like in the Fallout universe before.
We knew we wanted the player to get that feeling that you get when you go to the real Las Vegas Strip, which is, you know, you set foot at one end of the Strip and you look down and you see like all the neon lights.
It's about kind of bringing that feeling back of those big signs that say, you know, Dean Martin and Sinatra, you know, playing and things like that.
You also see a lot of debauchery on the Strip, of course. You see a lot of, you know, drunken soldiers who are kind of stumbling around from casino to casino.
Walking around in drunken stupors and puking on the sidewalks and dancing naked in fountains and that sort of thing.
Securitron robots will roll out of there and patrol the Strip quietly, just day in and day out. So if you show any iron on the streets or start shooting, those guys will take you out. I think players can probably spend as much time as they want on the Strip. We have a whole series of casino games.
You can gamble on the Strip. That's the most basic thing, the reason why most of the people are there.
There's an extensive series of quest lines that go on within the city, as you know, as one might expect. Players should have plenty to do.
The one thing about Fallout always done is really kind of had fun people acting in it. And with Fallout 3, it really continued. And so we want to make sure we're still doing that. And obviously, you have Ron Perlman coming back.
Ron Perlman has been the voice of Fallout for so long, it was kind of like, well, of course he's going to be the narrator.
You are a courier, hired by the Mojave Express.
It's nice to be working on this same character for this many installments over this span of time.
The legate is crowned as the new Caesar.
We really took it character to character and just looked for who would really be the best voice for the role.
The man who tried to murder you, who's voiced by Matthew Perry in the game. This guy is the leader of a gang called the Chairmen.
Fallout is just bigger and smarter than any game I've played before. There's like just amazing amounts of things to do, and I like the idea that you can, you know, sort of pick what you're going to say to somebody and go on all these quests, and it's just this gigantic world that seems sort of endless. Like I said, baby, all Benny needs is a stealth boy and a bobby pin.
The DJ of Radio New Vegas is Mr. New Vegas, and it's voiced by Wayne Newton.
Howdy, folks, it's Mr. New Vegas, and I have a good feeling about all of you listening. Of all the things that I have done in my career, and I've done one or two, this has been the one thing that I have looked forward to, because it was so out of the realm of what I have done in my career. This is Mr. New Vegas wishing you ladylike luck tonight.
Is there anything old Vic can do you for? If I find my way into a voice, a sort of a person will appear that doesn't sound like me and it doesn't think like me. That's always when it's the best, because it surprises me, it surprises them. Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit if it ain't my old friend from Good Springs.
Not too long ago, they took Nelson and Searchlight. They got some camps on the eastern shore of the Colorado, and the monstrosity on the hill across the lake. That's for Caesar.
Chris Christopherson, who's got an amazing voice, very thick and gravelly and really fun to work with.
Just keeping that dam secure and operational day to day is enough work for one person.
Every officer I ever talked to, or every soldier, you know, it probably influenced some of my delivery on this.
So this will be lines 1 through 7, and it'll be take 1 whenever you're ready.
Rangers, this is the chief.
I hope players play this game, and I want them to be fully immersed in the world, and I want them to really feel each character when they're speaking to them as a totally different individual.
Yeehaw! Ain't that party?